NunesMagician. He set up for
Hello and welcome to yet another week here at Troy Nunes is an Absolute Live Stream. Steve Haller here, joining me as always, Andy Pregler and Christian DeGuzman. How are we doing, guys?
Pretty good, Steve. I'm glad you're the only one who showed up with a sports jersey that is still a sports team. Others are not in Brooklyn anymore. And I've got a fictional sports Quidditch team.
Yeah, I had to rep my boys against. They're playing the Galaxy tonight at 9, so it should be a hell of a game.
That will be my watch as I edit the article that goes live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on NunesMagician.com, part of the SB Nation College Blog Network.
Look at that. We got plugs and everything. Awesome.
Oh, no, my camera.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could... and right there's the technical difficulty, and it wasn't my fault this time, okay? It wasn't me.
Or my fault. We're doing great. So...
Well, I was going to say, gentlemen... This is off to about as good of a start as most Syracuse things this week, but let's start with the positive, and let's talk about football, which is a sentence that I did not think I would be saying in May when it came to Syracuse Athletics, that football would be the positive side of things. While Christian adjusts his camera, I will give you the lowdown on what happened. No worries. I will give you the lowdown on what happened for football this week in case you lived under a rock or, were doing other things in life. The weather was beautiful in upstate New York this week and across a lot of the tri-state area. Go outside. Don't go on Twitter. It's probably better for your long-term health. Syracuse football had a press conference where we got to talk to players and we got to talk to Dino Babers about the spring season that was hidden from all of us. Cool. Fun. And then the NFL draft happened this week, where 2 Syracuse players got drafted, another 2 players got selected with undrafted free agent offers. Let's start with the guys who are leaving. Steve, you and I, from the get-go of this show, have loved everything that Andre Cisco and Ife Melifonwu brought to this team for the moments that they were actually on the field. Let's talk about... I don't necessarily have a lot of insight on the teams that selected them when it comes to the Jaguars or the Lions. Both teams were not good.
No.
Therefore, they probably need help.
Yes.
And these 2 guys can probably help.
Yeah.
But what was it, and I don't know how closely you pay attention to the draft, but what was it about these 2 that made them draftable versus a Trill who got a great undrafted free agent offer, but Cisco and Ife both went in the 3rd round if Cisco went in the 3rd round, if he went in the 4th round, I believe.
No, he went in the end of the 3rd round.
Yep. Second
Detroit
pick in the 3rd.
So there we go. So both of them went in the 3rd round, which means that they definitely were top half NCAA talent, but there were other defensive backs taken above them. Steve, what was it about Cisco's game and Ife's game that translates to the next level, but held them back from being the elite level players that are taken, day 1 and in the 2nd round?
Well, for Ife, the fact that he was able to showcase his talents for an entire year did help. Also, the fact that he's, for a cornerback, a complete physical specimen, playing at 6'2" or 6'3" and 210, and still being able to move, with the agility a normal corner would. Cisco, on the other hand, you watch his film and it's just peaks and a little peaks and valleys, but it's mostly peaks. He just really has a knack for, I guess, the old stereotypical nose for the football. I don't want to go into complete coach speak on it, but he really does just find his way around the field to where he needs to be. He just has that instinct, and he also plays very well downhill. So both of them easily had the tangibles and intangibles to make a top 3 round pick. Trill, on the other hand, I believe last week, if I remember correctly, I called it that if he was going to be in a late round, I would much prefer him to go undrafted and to sign as an undrafted free agent where he needed, or someplace where he was wanted. And it seems with the speed at which the the Saints picked him up, that was very much the case. So within 20 minutes of the draft ending, he was already signed with the Saints. So I think all in all, they ended up in good spots. I think Cisco joins at least 2 other ACC members in Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne on the Jaguars. So I think we may all have to start honorarily following the Jags as the second team. So it's overall it was a very good day for Orange. Also of note, the amazing streak of professional punters from Syracuse continues, with Nolan Cooney getting a look down in New Orleans as well. So we'll see where the next steps take this whole class. But overall, I'd say we did as good as we could have expected on draft night, outside of maybe Cisco and Iffy falling a little beyond where we thought they would.
Yeah. And I just want to point out to the Jacksonville fans, Steve, this is more your era, but I do know a fan. He was my former boss, shout out Chari, is a Jaguars fan specifically because the last time that a Syracuse draft pick, a defensive back, was drafted this high, he went to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that player was
Mr. Donovan Darius.
Yes, so he owns a Donovan Darius Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. I am almost guaranteed he will own a Cisco jersey by the end of this week. But Christian, speaking about the undrafted free agents a little bit, it's not a surprise that Cooney went undrafted. Punters getting drafted are nuts. The only one that I believe was taken was by the Steelers, and they took Georgia Tech's absolute unit of a punter. The Trill is a little bit more interesting, and this is something that you dove into a lot this year, was just the utilization of the nickelbacks in Syracuse's system and how unique Trill and that entire system works. It seems like him going undrafted allowed him to go somewhere that would utilize that very specific skill set instead of forcing him into a more iffy traditional role of stand-up one-on-one on the outside corner.
And I'm not going to be the first one to claim that I have a wealth of knowledge on the NFL and like what is specific each team runs. But if the Saints are as creative defensively as they are offensively with Taysom Hill, you're probably going to guess that they're going to run a couple nickel packages. And as everyone has said from the Syracuse side, Trill is the perfect nickel cornerback. He's the perfect slot quarterback that has the physical attributes that stand out in a football player, nonetheless a quarterback. So that's definitely, like Steve said, almost somewhere that's probably a predetermined fit that probably Trill and the Saints figured out. And like, as we've seen, you can get very creative. And like you said, Andy, you can get very creative as to where to play Trill, because you can almost guarantee that he'll stand out no matter what in whatever position that they put him out on the defense.
Yeah, and this is, I think, probably the selling pitch. And let's focus again on the current team now. This is the pitch that Tony White makes to everybody. He's like, I got 3 quarterbacks going, and one of them was a straight-up nickelback. This is all very promising for the players that are currently on the roster. And let's transition to what we've seen of the players currently on the roster, which is not a whole lot.
53 seconds.
Exactly.
A total of 53 seconds.
And how much of that 53 seconds was a block S?
I believe the last at least 6.
So let's say 47 seconds.
Fair enough.
and then you subtract the amount of like people just standing around. So probably about 30 seconds of actual pad-on-pad collision game time playing.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And because we're absolutely insane around here, we decided to approach this. I'm trying to loop the collective into this. It's all me. So because I'm mildly insane, I decided to break down the whole damn thing like it was a trailer, because that effectively was what it was. We didn't get to see any, live all 22 footage. We didn't get to see any live actual scrimmage footage. We got this cut. So we took what we had and we could run with it. I'd say overall it was promising, but you can cut even anything you want to look promising. So here we are again.
You could probably create a great hype video from the 1-10 season.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You just started off.
And it's weird that SU never did that.
Yeah, seriously. You can. Is it really that weird?
So where's the scroll that we have of marketing mistakes has made?
So just started off with Garrett picking off the
number one pick in the NFL draft.
The new Jaguars quarterback, Lawrence.
Good old Trevor
Lawrence. There we go.
See, you just get lost in the locks. That's why.
I was like hair. Who is hair? Just start it with that and just play that on loop, because what the hell, that's enough. But yeah, I still am gonna go with my petition to that the offensive line is going full Armor Wars, and that Dakota Davis needs to be either Iron Man or War Machine, because holy shit did this whole thing start off with him just sitting there suited up in every brace possible, which, hey, I've been there. Like, when I played, I rocked both knee braces and an elbow brace, but he made it look good. So
Steve, I mean, I'd not derail this into an offensive line cast, but I'm going to do this.
Seriously, you do this every time.
We have Steve here. We might as well utilize it.
Right. So what is the purpose, as somebody who was explicitly skilled positions on 7-and-7 flag football, what is the point of the braces when, as an offensive line analyst community, we're constantly talking about mobility and we're constantly talking about their quick feet, and we are throwing them in braces that inherently inhibit mobility and quicker movements?
So how many offensive linemen
is auto not a skill position?
I do not believe auto qualifies as a skill position. It's more like a punter position.
So I'm gonna go some quick math on you, Pregs. How many offensive linemen are there?
There are 5.
How many defensive linemen are there in a standard formation?
There are 3 or 4, depending on what team.
And then a given play, how many linebackers are coming at you?
You're probably going to get 4 linebackers coming at you, 3 or 4.
Yeah, so you've got 10 to 12 bodies that are all above the average human size, that are all banging into each other in a small package. And after you've had your ACL blown out by a 300-pounder falling on your knee, you wear braces. And in all honesty, like, even at the D3 level, it's usually mandated that you're wearing knee braces at least. The elbow brace that he wears is probably, from some injury or something else. But the knee braces are an absolute, like, I think anyone who doesn't wear them is, playing with fire. Having been through that myself, not a lot of fun. Especially when it's friendly fire. So, yeah. But
this is good to know, because it does seem like there was a time period where, like, we would have Justin Pugh rolling out there with absolutely nothing, going bareback and just being like, it's great. He's an NFL offensive lineman now. That clearly is the exception and not the norm of what we're dealing with when we're recruiting offensive linemen to Syracuse.
Well, and sometimes too, if it's a guy that's got prior history, you'll see him wearing, like, you won't see anything on the outside. You'll see, like, they'll be wearing, like, the Don Joys underneath that are, like, actually form fitted to his legs and all that. So, he may have actually rocked something. You've now learned more about knee braces than you ever cared to. So yeah. But this is what we get to do when the spring game footage is literally 30 seconds of actual game action, because SUA Athletics won't give us anything. I think probably one of the most interesting dynamics of the spring game footage, and Steve, you and I got into this a little bit with, thank you, Christian. We got into this last week when we were talking about the offensive coordinator huddle, is that we still really don't have any idea which quarterback, don't really care about which quarterback in this moment, who they're going to be throwing the ball to. Because we know that Sean Tucker, based off of the interviews, the fact they put him out there, the fact that we've seen it in the footage, we've seen the coaches talk about him previously, he's the starting running back. He's a 3-down back who can do a lot of damage when healthy. He's gotten bigger, stronger, all these good things. I don't really know what the other weapons are, and maybe it's Anthony Quealy. In that footage, we saw some names that we did not expect. Damian Elford, hello. Yep.
I don't really know, and Christian, again, as the captain of the throw the ball to the goddamn tight end group, I don't really know what of this footage you can take positively or negatively in the game, other than we're going to see a lot of new faces. And as somebody who advocated for a lot more different usages. What would you like to see more of when we actually get, open practices in the fall, or, in that first game? Like, what weapons do you want to see actually utilized?
When's the last time someone not named Luke Benson or Irv Phillips ran some sort of a go route over the middle of the field?
I can answer you this because it was Stephen Mahar in this footage.
There you go.
That Jacoby and Morgan hit. So there you go. Tight end. Go figure.
And that leads straight into the point. Like, there's weapons on this team. Chris Elmore has reportedly caught passes also during spring practice. Steve Zantz should tell you everything you need to know about that statement.
Yeah, I was channeling my inner Zemo there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, we're going to loop that and put it on the NunesMagician site.
1 hour of dancing hail.
For 1 hour. I have the best royalty-free music that you can find underneath it, and like it's going to be perfect. But there's actually options. The reason why we're asking who's going to throw the ball is because we're not sure if the offensive game plan is actually going to utilize all said options. And that's going to come down to the coaches not only, encouraging the quarterbacks to find set options, but giving the receivers routes in order to give Tommy or Garrett, whoever's throwing the ball, those options. Because like I've said a couple of times on this cast, the majority of the routes that were run were either out routes, go routes, or slant routes. And there's not much else that was like run except for like maybe a Taj in route towards the end of the season. And like, so like those plays, the play like diversity was so limited when you have so many talented options, because you still have Luke Benson, who, as like I've said, and as Dino Babers has said, they need to get the ball to him more. Stephen Mahar, like you saw, has some good straight line speed and is pretty tall. Landon Morris also fits that mold, all tight ends. But you still have the tall guys like we saw from Damian Alford, and then you have the perhaps more stable options in Queeley and Harris. And now you have guys like Adams who can probably come out of the backfield and catch a ball as well. Not sure how well Tucker would perform in that area as well, but you might even turn to Cooper Lutz, who we saw a couple of times in that practice footage as well.
Yeah, and that
the options are there for Syracuse. It's up to the coaching staff now to put them in the best positions to get the ball, which is what we didn't see a ton of last year.
Yeah, we did see 2 passes to Courtney Jackson, which were both completed. So that's a step in the right direction.
And not dropped, right, which is also a step in the right direction.
So that and they showed them back to back, and I was like, oh, those are the same. No, those are different catches. Okay, we're good. We caught 2 passes. But
it's not like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where they should have seen kick landing 5 times in a row.
Sudden Death is a classic. Do not besmirch the movie that features a fighting penguin mascot.
Well, speaking of classics that we haven't seen in a long time, there was no footage on our beloved Tommy DeVito during this. So, Pregs, what do you think we should take from this?
Listen, Steve, you and I, and Christian has been a part of this on this cast, but also in the Nunes Slack, many a times, you and I have become not necessarily Coach Dino Babers whisperers, but there's a certain cadence and there's a certain vocabulary that he uses. And in listening to his coordinator speak in the huddle, you can tell that is not a unique language. That is a shared language among the staff. And it was abundantly clear that while the coaching staff understands that bringing Garrett Schrader in is not just helpful for the long-term planning of the quarterback position that has been decimated by poor recruiting, it also helps the short term of re-energizing a team and a fan base that felt like Dino needed to do something in order to bounce back from a 1-10 season. That being said, they never commit to Schrader being anything more than another quarterback in the group, while they continuously say that Tommy DeVito is the longest tenured has been in the group the longest of the group. So, coach speak, Andy, is deducing that this means Tommy DeVito is the starting quarterback. But Dino Babers, being the paranoid man that he is, that does not allow us to talk to coordinators in any sort of actual interview setting, that does not allow footage of his team to be shown other than these social media videos, believes that we will not actually see any footage of Tommy DeVito or Garrett Schrader throwing a ball again with a specific first or second team until we actually get to the first day of warm-ups before the game against Ohio. Like, it is... I think that this is going to be somewhat content that they try to hide the fact that Tommy DeVito is the starting quarterback. And I don't understand the logic other than they are very much catering to a small contingent of the fan base that feels that Tommy DeVito wasn't good enough in the 2 games that he was actually 100% healthy. So I don't know. To me, this is all super frustrating. And Steve, I kind of wanted to flip this back on you. As somebody who has had the conversation with Hoya Suxa on Twitter about like what the Baylor offense, like we had this conversation a very long time ago, like what actually is the Baylor offense? What is Dino's interpretation of the Baylor offense? Is there the actual offensive complexity that a lot of these pass-heavy offenses use? Or to Christian, to your point, are we just running like a very plain, quick thing that has 3 different routes and you use the running game to kind of open up those routes? Tommy DeVito, at the end of the day, is the quarterback to run this system. Plain and simple.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we talked about it last week after the conversations with Gilbert and White, and Gilbert didn't really lay anything out there. Like you said, it was a lot of coach speak. It was a lot of the same mantras over and over. One thing that was apparent was that coming into last season, they didn't have any time with these guys. And he and White both touched on the fact that this year it's very different. They're getting reps. They're getting these guys into where they need to be in the system. And Gilbert is running like he always has, even with, I mean, he may have some quirks to it, but he's always been a student of the Babers tree of this system. That said, I think they need to break things out a little bit more than, like Christian said, the 3 basic routes that they've been running with various iterations of those, and a zone right, zone left, dive right, dive left run game. There needs to be more, and I think with a full offseason and a full competition in the QB room, we're going to see that open up a little more. I think they're going to push each other a little more to make some of the throws that allow you to run more than the basic routes. It's an interesting situation as to where this is putting the whole team coming out of the spring. And I don't know, Christian, if you've got any more thoughts on what they can do to elaborate on this, or what they can do to change the system for the better.
It's tough because what we know about the Baylor offense, what we know from it succeeding, is to slowly chip away and slowly go down the field. That's where we saw last year's offense work the best, where they were constantly moving the chains and not looking for the home run ball that would work maybe 10% of the time. And by 10% of the time, we're meaning those like random long 60-yard touchdowns to Taj Harris. But that's not the reliable form of offense that Syracuse needs to be building itself on in order to score points. What we've seen is Syracuse moving the chains slowly and slowly, so that they can do to what their defense was last year: tire out the opponent's defense with just pure pace, pure speed, and just staying on the field and running down the field and slowly chipping away. And that's why you hear Dino say it's a run-first offense, because that's the most effective way in order to run the field. It's not always necessarily the short passes. It's going to be setting up the short passes by running the ball. It just gets to the problem then where, as I've said in the past, and as we've alluded to, the simple routes that Syracuse runs just makes the offense way too predictable. And especially in the ACC, it's going to be easy to pick up what Syracuse is doing. especially and even in the run game. Same thing in the run game. When you're running in between the tackles for the majority of the game, like it gets very easy to just clog the box and not popping out to the outside of the tackles every once in a while, or every other run. It just makes the run game that much easier to stop as well.
Yeah, and I mean that it really does kind of cut into any productivity you would have there. I don't know. Somehow we've turned this into 30 minutes on football.
Which we always do. But I will say that the last point on this, that to put the bow on the whole thing, is that I think Syracuse's offense can be simple, but that requires the players to execute. And even in the year that Syracuse won the Camping World Bowl, there were very few players that executed to a level that they could make a very simple system just be unbeatable because of them. Eric Dungy, a lot of that season was covered by Eric Dungy improvising plays and Syracuse being an excellent broken play team, and the defense having one of the best turnover luck seasons in modern Power 5 history. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. And I do think that we are now kind of seeing Babers and his staff have to adapt to the idea of we're probably never going to have that much luck on both sides of the ball coexist at the same amount of time. And we have to build a system we can raise the floor of our players' ability all we want, but that ceiling is not something that we can count on every 4 years. We need to do a better job of implementing a system that can raise the entire ceiling of every player instead of relying on a very high ceiling of a few individual players. And I think with Andre Sisco getting drafted and moving on, like that's the last remnants of that team, of like the high-end playmakers who made that team possible. We've now completely moved on. It's time to find a different kind of identity for success with Syracuse football. But one team that has found a consistent success is sneak into the postseason and then frustrate the hell out of everybody. The basketball team, yay! They made the Sweet 16. Everybody left. For those who might be
both sides of the basketball spectrum.
Yes, let's start with the men because there was one more name to add to the not coming back list. It was Quincy Guerrier, who, if you came here last week, you came here the week before, you came here the week before that. Christian, Steve, myself, all consistently hedged every basketball preview with the fact that Quincy Guerrier is probably not coming back, but like here's the prediction with Quincy, here's the prediction without Quincy. We can now officially end the worst kept secret in Syracuse basketball that Quincy Guerrier is not coming back.
Second worst.
Yeah, fair. Yes, the first worst secret was officially confirmed as well. Jimmy Boeheim Jr. is now. I'm going to screw up my Boeheim so much this year. Jimmy Boeheim Jr. is officially signed as an Orange person. He will be slotting in at the 4, replacing Quincy Guerrier, who is still in the NBA draft process, has not officially signed an agent, but has decided to enter the transfer portal anyways. I'm not going to lie. I was just expecting I've signed an agent and I'm not coming back. The transfer portal felt like, we talked about it with the women's side, felt like a little bit of a knife twist to the current staff. I don't want to read into it too much because Quincy put out a statement that was very, very nice and very just thank you for all you've done.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we had most of the basketball team transfer away, and we had a player who doesn't even know if he's going to be playing college basketball still preemptively say, if I come back and play college basketball, it's not going to be for this team. Christian, I did not decide to feed the trolls and enter into the comment section. I know Steve wades in there every so often, but as the person who is on Twitter a lot and has been in the middle of all this transfer portal news, what do you make of the fact that Syracuse has basically replaced its entire team of playmakers with a bunch of former high recruits that couldn't cut it somewhere else? Loaded question and all.
That is a great question. And the honest answer is I don't know. Because again, like as many people have said, we're in this new situation with the one-time transfer rule in effect, where it's basically college basketball free agency. And we haven't seen that. We're so used to stability in college basketball that we're not used to, everyone going up and leaving. And I'm not, and I get that Quincy probably, and like you, I think like I was expecting the I'm signing an agent and staying in the draft post, not the I'm entering the transfer portal. So I'm the only option I have next year is not Syracuse. um, so that's just kind of odd. Like you, I usually don't wade into the comment section trolls to analyze what everyone is saying. But yeah, it's odd because it almost feels like that same like kind of like you know I I I just don't know exactly what to make of it. But as we've all said, and you could even go back to December and January when either we were talking about it in the Nunes Slack or here on this live cast, Quincy was probably leaving for the draft anyway, way back then. But the enter the transfer portal is something odd. I just don't know how much to make of
Yeah,
that.
it definitely
I still think
a little bit of
I still think the yeah. I still think the option for him is going to be he will enter the draft and stay in the draft. But I just don't know. I don't know what to make, how much to read into the transfer portal decision.
yeah. There was definitely a little bit of pissing in the Cheerios on the way out. It's like oh I'm not coming back, and I'm definitely not coming back now. Um, like it sends a statement. I mean, there's no two ways about that. And for that to happen the exact same time that Woody Newton piece came out, and there's just a lot of weird question marks surrounding this whole program right now. And I don't know if we have enough information to draw any conclusions from said question marks, but there's a lot going on. So I guess it'll give us more things to talk about next week too. When it
Probably.
comes to who's transferring, because why not? It just seems to be an ongoing saga.
I was going to say at this point, I think that there's a lot of questions about whether Syracuse men's side is going to go after any more big names. And I think the honest answer that no one wants to hear is that Boeheim is pretty content with the team that he has. He had a list of players that the staff went out and got almost immediately. If there is a true big impact player who expresses interest in Syracuse, I don't think that Boeheim is stubborn enough to say, don't give this guy a look, but I don't think Syracuse is actively going to be trying to sway anybody away from their top picks to come to Syracuse because he's pretty content with the team he has. He has a returning point guard that he has played for the last 2 years. He's got a returning shooting guard who was the best player in Syracuse's tournament run. He's got a three who's a local Syracuse product who everybody's projecting really high ceiling for if everything hits the way that was supposed to hit and not the way it played out at Marquette. You've got a four who was an all Ivy League player that is also his son and has seemed since day one to be pretty much in order and going to start and play. I don't really know much what else to say beyond that. And then your five position is a returning center who Boeheim trusts more than the backup center who played really well in the tournament. And like when you read it out like that, the team doesn't seem all that bad. It just glosses over a lot of really big holes in a team that plays a very specific system that if that system is not clicking, this team will not do well.
And it's interesting you bring that up because you said the three is a former Ivy recruit who knows the Syracuse program well and is a local Syracuse product. And for those of you who don't know, that's Senior Torrance. But I kind of want to bring that into the roundtable discussion that we had on the site, and I think we actually agree that it's going to be either Benny Williams or Cole Swider who will um, who will be on the wings, and more often than not, it's going to be Benny Williams starting, and then either Swider or Jimmy Boeheim on the wings in the starter, and Torrance is probably going to be the starting backup. But no matter how you put it, it's a kind of a weird combination of guys that are going to be playing on this team, no matter who's on the court. And so, like, we a lot about like balance and identity in the past couple of weeks, and that's almost harder to find with this group of people because you definitely have the offensive side and the backcourt. What's the front court going to look like? Is that going to be a more defensive focused front court, or is that going to be all offense also? Um, Except for Barama, who needs Pittsburgh's holy water in order to, actually be the offensive force that Boeheim wants him to be. And probably also needs Steve's knee braces, but we'll get to that also.
All of them.
So, like, the identity of this team is just weird. And I'm not sure any one of us is going to figure it out until we probably get to ACC play next year.
Well, none of us are going to figure it out, but we sure as hell tried this week.
There was a lot of effort put into this question, and I appreciate everybody trying to do an entire offseason of basketball work in a week. But yeah, this is going to be... We're going to debate this rotation to death because there's really not much else to do, and the team made the Sweet 16 last year. And I don't... It's really weird to say this, but based off of the projections that a lot of experts are saying, like, that's Syracuse's floor for next year. And that is a conversation that we will get into in a few weeks of, like, what are the actual expectations for this program? Not from a logical standpoint, like we try to provide, but what, like, the general fan base actually expects of this team and what will be considered a failure. Because if this season ends in any kind of, definitive failure, there's going to be a lot of questions about what happens with Jim Boeheim, considering both of his sons will be graduating from Syracuse at the end of next season.
I will say most of those expert predictions were made with the caveat that the belief was that Quincy Gabriel and Alan Griffin would both be back on this team next year. And Griffin defensive issues aside, both of those guys being back on this team, what makes this a whole different discussion.
Very much so. And also, well, yes. I think a lot of those did come out after the Kadari news, but
yes,
any of those moves would have had severe implications on what the predictions are. So either way, I mean, prognostication aside, nobody, like Christian said, nobody knows, and we're not going to know for a good long while at this point. So
yeah, honestly, our first look at the team is going to be when TBT Boeheim's Army actually practices against the current team, and we get Eric Devendorf talking crap about the current team.
Yep.
And that's when we'll figure out who's actually good and what the starting rotation looks like.
Devendorf is going to request a scorer's table in Mello. Because he...
Yeah, I do also appreciate the fact that we will have more off-season content because, more Syracuse is always more Syracuse.
Well, I think we could take this entire 15-minute discussion and just add another footnote to the dictionary definition of Syracusing.
Yeah, sounds right.
Well, I was going to say, Steve, you wanted content. Syracuse sports ended up in a lot of discussions this week because of what was going on, and we created a lot of content, just not necessarily for the positive things. So this is when we are going to start talking in our therapy words, because we're going to talk about the Syracuse men's lacrosse situation.
It's not about the Falcon and Winter Soldier recap that we posted on Monday.
That is for the after show.
Okay.
I've got plenty of thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's for the Patreon. We never launched that, did we?
No. So next week.
We should. That'd be awesome.
We've got a lot of time before Loki comes out.
There you go.
Okay, so I want to preface this with none of us actually knows what's going on. Some of us have heard things from sources that may or may not be verified, and there's a lot of people who are talking about this that don't know what's going on, because ultimately, to date, the only person who has definitively said that he has any knowledge about the details of what happened are John Desko. John Wildhack went on Packer and Durham and did the blanket statement of, we cannot share anything because of privacy concerns. So I'm sure that he's been addressed on the situation. He might not know the details because he might not want to know the details. But Desco is the player is the man who basically stood up in front of the media, answered the questions, said the decision to reinstate Scanlon after the suspension was his. That was his decision. And that he had done the work of reviewing the whole situation. So, without going into what we think may have happened, without looking into the evidence that has been submitted to the district attorney's office that tells a story of what may have happened, what we know happened is that Chase Scanlon has not played for Syracuse men's lacrosse, and it adds another layer to the narrative that the number 22 jersey has been a disappointment for Syracuse men's lacrosse, not just in Scanlon's time period, but for the last few number 22s. And this is correlated with Syracuse men's lacrosse falling out of potentially, the perennial Final Four contenders every year. And Christian, they did not beat Notre Dame this weekend. I don't know if they would have beaten Notre Dame with Chase Scanlon. The issues run a lot deeper than just one player. But it sure as hell seems like men's lacrosse is not necessarily off the rails, but that train is wobbling to a dangerous degree.
And it goes back to what we've talked about with Dino Babers in his football program. And the thing that we talk a lot about, and it applies here, is transparency. And the fact that there's been so many mixed, jumbled messages throughout this entire thing just hasn't helped anyone. And without speculating as to what's going on, the fact that there's been so many different corrections and restatements that have come out shows to me that there's definitely a disconnect on the media side and the administration side about just how to handle each situation that comes up, not just in Syracuse men's lacrosse, but in Syracuse athletics in general. It's that the transparency. I know we as fans want transparency. I know athletic departments want to keep everything a little bit more secretive, but it's tough to justify a decision like this without being a bit more transparent as to why the decision was made. And whether that was being transparent as to why the suspension happened in the first place or why the reinstatement happened is a whole different issue. Because the big thing about the reinstatement was that the players didn't even know that Scanlon was reinstated into the team until they found out on social media. And every single bit of history has told us that if players find out news on social media, it usually goes badly for the team.
Yeah.
And so that series of events is what started the entire Syracuse players claiming to, walk out of practice if Scanlon showed up. The meetings that have supposedly happened between team captains Desco and Wildhack, the confusion just in the media calls this week, and then the outrage on just social media supporting the players' decision more so than the mute points of athletics. That's the story here. So getting the message first correctly, getting the message first out correctly is what Syracuse has to learn from this. Because if the players were so adamant against the decision that they were willing to walk out of practice against a team that had demolished them the first time that they played, is very, very telling about what they thought of the whole situation initially.
Yeah, the whole thing's a mess. There's no two ways to put it. It doesn't. It's of course not a good look for Scanlon. It's also not a good look for how the athletic department has handled this. It's a rough look for Desco, who's been set up as a sacrificial lamb in this whole thing. Like, here, let's drop this major news bulletin. Yeah, and then
same difference.
Yeah, in this case, pretty much when you throw them up there like you did at 3:00 on a random weekday and say, here, answer all these questions about nothing to do with lacrosse. I'm not a doctor, but that's not usually the lacrosse coach's job. Whatever. it happened. It is where we stand at present, but there's got to be some sort of damage control or something coming out of SU, and there's got to be some sort of clarity on, like, are they just going to go the rest of the season with Scanlon practicing, playing wall ball over in a corner, and everybody else playing on the normal pitch? Like, what are you going to do? Like, where does this end up going?
Well, we might not have to find out for very long, because Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, but Syracuse is now in a win or go home scenario, based off of the schedule that has unfolded.
No, they're still fine even if they even if they lose against Robert Morris, which they probably shouldn't. But if they lose, they'll still be at a 500 record. So they still qualify for the NCAA tournament, based on their strength of schedule. Like, they're going to be in as an at-large bid. Seeded or unseeded is another question, but based on their strength of schedule and based on the fact of the teams that they've lost to, and some of the programs they be in, like, it's a respectable schedule, and they should get into the tournament. Yeah. To turn away from the, mess in the week, it's hard to see. It's hard to figure out if that had an impact on the team or not, because from what I'm starting to see from Twitter and what I'm agreeing with on Twitter as well, is that this might be just a Syracuse team that just has to luck into the right matchup, no matter who they're facing. Let's take the ACC. Who are the teams that they got embarrassed by? It was UNC and Notre Dame. They've dominated Virginia twice, for 7.5 quarters, and they almost completed a great comeback against Duke. That just might mean that teams who are more stylistically like UNC and Notre Dame have a better time against Syracuse, and teams that are more stylistically like Duke and Virginia are more better to Syracuse's, game. And what you're seeing in both those teams is that UNC and Notre Dame have better team play and better off-ball scoring options, whereas Duke and Virginia have better hero ball dodgers, one-on-one isolation matchups. And Syracuse's defense is obviously much better at covering the one-on-one dodgers and the hero ball players than a great teamwork off-ball passing of UNC and Notre Dame. That doesn't fix the offensive issues that we saw from the Notre Dame game as well, and whether that was because this team was distracted or not, but this was a sloppy game on both ends, and offensively there were just passes that weren't being made, clears that weren't being made. Porter had an off game, a really bad off game so far, so much so that he was pulled in the third quarter. So, like, it's hard to see. It once again comes down to how much of this do you attribute to the team being distracted by the Scanlon news and Notre Dame just being a really, really bad matchup for Syracuse.
Yeah. It doesn't sound great, but what I will say is that at least there is a little bit of time. And I guess that's pretty much all that the team can ask for at this point. Is you've got the Robert Morris matchup, get things right, and hopefully that things will work out better when it comes tournament time. The women on the other side, ACC have go right. They've run up against some opposition that has actually pushed them a lot. Boston College for the upteenth time, Virginia Tech. I think Louisville gave them a push as well. All teams that Syracuse kind of manhandled during the regular season, and then come the postseason, they gave Syracuse all that they could handle, and Syracuse still came out on top. And it's really nice to see a Syracuse team faced with adversity have to dig deep and find it, and not need to do so in an ass-backwards way that requires a little bit of schadenfreude. So congrats to the women. We said it so many times. That Syracuse UNC matchup in the tournament again is just going to be one of the best women's lacrosse games to watch, and I'm very excited for it. I just kind of wish that it wasn't so preordained.
Yeah, they're slightly chipping away. the 9-4 loss today was much better than the previous showing. Mm-hmm. So baby steps.
Yeah, Goldstock had a much better game. 11 saves, 9 goals allowed. The big thing was the same thing in the first UNC game, the turnovers. UNC had 13 caused turnovers, and that's 13 of 16 Syracuse turnovers were caused by UNC. And Syracuse only had 4 caused turnovers. So, like, there's the disparity there. It's just taking care of the ball. It's tough because this UNC team is just so good in general. But, like, defensively, you saw this team start to make strides against, what UNC does well. Limiting Katie Hogue to only a goal and an assist was pretty good. Jimmy Ortega was still great. But it's a step in the right direction as to, like, fight against UNC and maybe third time lucky for Syracuse should they eventually meet. Hopefully in the championship game.
Yeah. I'm in general pretty pumped about the women's side. I forgot to talk about the women's basketball side in our basketball conversation. But they had some news this week that was less than stellar. Our favorite big woman in the middle, Camila Cardoso, has moved on, not to the ACC, but to South Carolina, the Gamecocks, which are a very good team, very, very good program.
They were a layup away for going into overtime in the Final Four.
Yeah, and you know who can get you that layup? A 6-foot center Brazilian stud of a center. I'm kind of bummed because we're gonna see her get to a Final Four in a national title game with them, and if
not more.
Yeah. South Carolina 3-peat, and we're just sitting here like, okay, cool.
And I think it was John or Sarah, I forget which one said it in the Slack, of like, when Camilla like does get to her senior year and she's going to the NBA draft, like, no one's going to remember her time in Syracuse. Yeah. She's going to have racked up so many accolades at South Carolina, and South Carolina just has so much more visibility of a program that she will be a South Carolina legend and not a Syracuse legend, and that is really disappointing on a lot of different fronts. But we wish her the best, and if you beat UConn, we love you. That's pretty much all I got.
Yeah, and I guess we can take that women's basketball thread and send it to our last topic for the night, a little Orange in the Pros recap.
Yeah.
Because Tiana Magakaya, as we mentioned last week, has signed on with the Phoenix Mercury for at least training camp. Good to see her, continually spotlighted by the team as well on a lot of their media channels. So hopefully things are going well on her account.
Yeah, I think it's she's going to be in a position where she doesn't have to start right away. She can learn. Yeah. She can learn from some of the best in the game. And when Howard came on here, Tiana has the upside of a generational talent. It's just a matter of how she can get back there after all that she's been through physically, not just mentally. There's a physical aspect to her game that she admitted she was never playing at 100% this last year. Maybe being in the pros with a professional eating nutritionist, physical workout schedule will allow her to more readily accelerate that physical road to recovery that she's still undergoing. But also we talked about the NFL draft. We had some lacrosse players get drafted.
Yeah, the Premier Lacrosse League had their draft this week, and it's only the third year of the Premier Lacrosse League. It's kind of, Paul Rabel's answer to the MLL, and while, as John said, it's unfortunate there's no more MLL because they merged with the PLL. The PLL was actually pretty exciting in the Premier Lacrosse League as the featured men's lacrosse league for the pros. They're doing some great and innovative marketing stuff, and there's getting a lot of eyes on lacrosse on the NBC network, whether they're on Peacock or on the main NBC. But they had 3 here taken. Peter Dirth as the 17th overall pick in the 3rd round. Stephen Rafis as the 25th pick in the 4th round, and Jamie Trimboli as the 4th pick in the 29th round. And I wrote a bit about fit for each of them guys. Dirth is going to be the one who's probably going to get the most time because the team he's going to needs a short stick defensive midfielder. Rafus will have a bit of tougher time. If he gets in the midfield, he could see some playing time. And Trimboli has an opportunity to earn a lot of playing time. Oddly enough, we were expecting Drake Porter to potentially get drafted, but no goalies were taken in the draft. So if a goalie was taken, he would have been like on most people's boards the number 2 goalie available. So that's kind of unfortunate that Porter didn't get drafted, but it's good to see that we've got some Syracuse players entering the league. You have former Syracuse players include Sergio Salcido, Randy Stotts, John Galloway, Joel Watt, Matt Abbott. Those are the former Syracuse players that are in the league right now. So you got a total of 8 guys now that are former Orange guys in the PLL, and that's good to see. And their season starts on June 4th. Most of the games will be on Peacock. Some of the games will be shown on main NBC. It's going to be really, really fun to watch because it's a really interesting take on lacrosse. For those who don't know, the Premier League Lacrosse League uses a 52-second shot clock instead of an 80-second shot clock, so the possessions go much quicker. And there's a 2-point line also, so you get to see some long bombs and some long shots getting taken, and to go in for two goals instead of 1.
Nice.
Had it. I'm genuinely glad that somebody's continuing to experiment with lacrosse. As a proponent of experiment with baseball in the minor leagues, I like to hear it. I also believe that we had some, as Steve is wearing his MLS gear, we've got some Syracuse players continuing to do some damage in the MLS to date.
Yeah. We do still, I believe, 5 with active rosters. Mo Adams currently isn't appearing in the 23 for, or at least the 18 for Atlanta. But we had a lot of orange.
Injured, correct?
What's that?
He's
I think he's still
injured,
recovering from that offseason
Okay.
surgery. So we'll see when he comes back and where he slots into that squad. We do have 2 orange-on-orange matchups this weekend, or we did, should I say. Earlier in the week, I can't remember. Was that? I can't remember what day it was, but Toronto FC against Vancouver. Ryan Raposo made his second appearance for the season. This time in the 95th minute, subbed in, and ended up getting a breakaway chance against Toronto, and who happened to be starting that game, and in this case finishing that game, Alex Bono, who stonewalled Raposo's first chance, or absolutely stonewalled his chance at a first goal. So that's a thing. Bono ended up going on to start the Toronto 3-1 loss against Cruz Azul in the CONCACAF Champions League this week. Next up would be New England playing the aforementioned Atlanta United. Tajon Buchanan, who has become a fixture in that New England squad, playing against Miles Robinson, who is one of the starting right backs. In this case, he came in at halftime, but he is one of the starting center backs for Atlanta United. So Buchanan ended up actually drawing the penalty that put the Revs on the board. So he's been making a name for himself. Like we mentioned earlier, there's some eyes on Europe, so we'll see where he ends up as this season progresses. And then finally, Kamal Miller ended up starting at left center back in a 0-0 draw against Columbus. So he's still in the starting lineup for Montreal, and good to see a guy who played 4 years in Orange, and then I think he was like late first round draft pick, which, as weird as it sounds in MLS, doesn't actually mean that you're going to make a squad. So
No, it's not.
To see him kind of work his way in, he got lucky when he first came into the league. Ended up having to play outside back, and playing fullback for a team right out of college when you played center back your entire career. Thankfully, in that back three, kind of helped him out a little, but he lucked into it and has made the absolute most of it, because he's kind of solidified himself in that system. So first at Orlando City and now at Montreal. So good to see all around. Quite a bit of orange action in MLS.
It is. It's always great to see that across the board, Syracuse is sending student athletes to the professional ranks across all sports, and that's always a positive if you're building an athletic program. That is an hour gentlemen, even after the racist talk, we somehow got back on track. We talked about the other sports that needed to be talked about, and we will do the full deep dive into specific knee brace brands and styles to wear in an off-season show when we really need some content.
I was going to say, we're really trying to scare people off these off-season shows, aren't we?
Listen, there's going to be it's going to get weird, and don't worry, the Marvel stuff will come at some point. It's just there's still Syracuse sports to be played right now, so you're all saved for another week.
Wait until Steve and I get on esports for an hour.
Yeah, there you go.
It is sports.
It's not the product reviews that are gonna scare people away eventually.
It's gonna be a good time. But for another week of a live cast, I'm Andy Pregler with Christian DeGuzman with Steve Haller. Thank you for joining. Click that like button, smash that subscribe button. Make sure that you ring the bell to get notifications the next time that we go live, which will be next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, as always. And make sure that you tell all your friends about us, because we're having a really good time, and we hope you are too. Did I get everything, Christian?
Yeah.
Did you write it down this time, or?
Oh God, no! Absolutely, I refuse to write anything down.
The only note I ever permanently have is Chris Bleich's name now, spelled out phonetically on my whiteboard. So.
And you snuck it in at the end of the show.
There you go. In that case, go Orange.
Go Orange.
Go Orange.